Democracy is usually not very efficient. So we play that balance out every day, every month, and every year as we work through our different orders of government, especially in this country where there are so many of them and it's so difficult to get them all on the same page. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Michael Rochlau. I'm a retired CEO of CUTA, the Canadian Urban Transit Association. It's been 4 years now. They've gone by like a lightning strike. I'm doing some consulting advisory work currently for Canada's third bus OEM, Grand West Transportation, out of Vancouver. So, who owns our roads? What an interesting title for this morning's fireside chat. No fire, but we're going to create our own. Last night, I was sitting at a table at dinner, and the conversation turned to the future, to the next 10 years, and somebody was asking, well, I wonder what it's going to look like when 10 years from now we think back to 2019 and to how things evolved in that next 10-year period that stands before us. Interesting question. Well, the truth of the matter is, who does own our roads? Who do we think owns our roads today, let alone 10, 15, 20 years from now when we will likely have automated or autonomous vehicles on our streets? Is it the province that owns our roads? Is it the municipality that owns our roads? Is it drivers that own our roads? Is it the citizens, the community as a whole that owns our roads? Is it pedestrians that own our roads? Well, certainly not at Portage and Main. Is it cyclists or taxis or delivery trucks that own our roads? All of those people, all of those actors might at some time think or behave as though they own our roads. And that in many ways is the dynamic that is going to play out, is already playing out, but will play out even more importantly in the coming years as technology changes and shapes how we move around, and as we have different expectations about access to and how the purpose of that road space, that critically important road space, changes. And that question of change really is what underlies what I see as being the three major challenges surrounding this discussion, especially as it relates to our interests and our sector. I'd like to begin by quoting our Prime Minister, who a couple of years ago at an artificial intelligence conference tweeted out this comment: "The pace of change has never been this fast, but it will also never be this slow again." Wow. You need to think about that for a moment to grasp what it really means. So I guess we need to fasten our seatbelts and know that we're in for an interesting ride. But some of us may not just be along for the ride. Some of us may be in a position to drive that change, or to help shape it, or smooth out some of the bumps. Some of us may be the disruptors, or regulators, or influencers. So I encourage you to think about the role that you might be able to play in shaping the direction in which all of this will go in the next number of years. So the pace of change has never been this fast, is going to keep getting faster, and we need to be ready for that ride. The problem is, the pace of change isn't linear. We don't know what that change is going to be. We know some things, but there's this high degree of uncertainty, which I think is the second challenge we face, is it's really hard to plan when you don't know how things are going to be tomorrow or next year or in 5 years. And third, we've got this whole issue about the conflicting access to road space, and in particular that convergence of interests, in particular between the citizens, the users, the municipalities, the private sector, public transit, and that's really kind of what we're going to be here to talk about in the next half hour or so. So I'm going to ask our two panelists, our two fireside chatters, to come up here. Andrew and Stephanie, please take a seat as we get started. Just makes me think back to a slide that somebody had on the screen yesterday about New York City back at the turn of the 20th century. I think there was a photograph of a street in New York where it was all horses and just one car. And then 13 years later, it was all cars and just one horse. And 13 years from now, well, what are we going to be seeing on our streets? We don't know, but I think that's what a lot of this is going to be about. So without further ado, let me introduce our first speaker. We have two speakers from Toronto, both of whom are going to talk a bit about their experience, their thoughts, their perspectives on this whole question of where we might be going with automated or autonomous vehicles. I'm going to use the two terms synonymously, even though there's some debate about what specifically they mean technically. The first guest we have this morning is Andrew Miller, who's Associate Director of Mobility at Sidewalk Labs. And at Sidewalk Labs, he is working on all aspects of the mobility part of Quayside, which is a fantastically exciting new development on the waterfront in downtown Toronto. They're very lucky at Sidewalk Labs to have Andrew, because Andrew has a great background in public transit and brings a lot of experience and knowledge to the table at that company. He used to be a strategic leader at the City of Mississauga, in particular on the Dundas Connects master plan for rapid transit. And before that, worked with the Ontario government, most recently as head of the Municipal Transit Policy Office, where I think many of us had the opportunity to benefit from his experience. So with that, welcome, Andrew Miller.
Here, I'll leave this. Thank you, Michael, for that kind introduction, and thank all of you. I want to thank all of you for giving me the privilege of being up on the stage today to speak to you. So I'm going to speak today briefly about our project in Toronto, and more generally about what our thoughts at Sidewalk Labs are about the future of autonomous mobility and the effects on the roads. So, well, first of all, you should be asking, well, who is this joker and why should I be listening to him? Aside from Michael's kind introduction, who is Sidewalk Labs? So, Sidewalk Labs is an alphabet company. So you've probably heard, you may have heard of Waymo, you've definitely heard of Google. These are our sister companies. So our role is to take the best of technology and the best of urban design and bring them together in ways to fix the externalities of urban life while enhancing the things that are great about cities. So we've been in existence for almost 4 years, and we have taken as our first step, we want to build a visionary neighborhood, a neighborhood of the future that proves out all of our theories about what makes a good city. We had many, it's up on the map there, inbound requests from cities that came to us and said, please come to our town to build our neighborhood. And we said, we actually would prefer to compete for the RFP that Waterfront Toronto has launched, because if there's one city we want to start in, it's Toronto. Toronto has got the diversity, Toronto's got the spirit of inclusivity, it's got a history of urbanism. As you may know, Jane Jacobs spent the latter half of her life and career in Toronto. And there's a rich technology ecosystem there. There are more tech jobs created in Toronto in the last year than in New York and Silicon Valley combined, which I wish was due to Toronto's foresight, but has got more to do with the lack of foresight of a certain leader nearby who's closed off technology immigration to his country. But I won't name names because I don't get political. So we have won the right to produce a plan for Quayside, which is a neighborhood on the Toronto waterfront at the foot of Parliament, where it meets Lakeshore. It is a remarkable, oh dear, my captions seem to have not survived the transition from PowerPoint to, from Google Slides to PDF. Oh well. The point of this is that Quayside is a remarkable place. It is a largely undeveloped space that is only 2 kilometers from the center of Canada's financial district. There really is no place like it anywhere else in North America. We're very excited to be able to develop it up to its full potential. What is that full potential? This. I only have, by my clock, 6 minutes and 30 seconds left, so I cannot speak to all of this. I can only speak to some of this, just a fraction of it. But if you're interested in how we're going to make a neighborhood that is not climate negative, not climate neutral, but climate positive, how we're going to make affordable housing that is twice as much as any other developer can do, how we're going to create buildings out of skyscrapers up to 35 stories out of wood, and create a new industry for tall timber construction in Canada, come find me at one of the breaks. I'd be happy to explain it to you. But I'm going to have to pass over it now to speak about our mobility vision, which has got 6 heads. And under other circumstances, I would spend equal time on all of these, but I think I'm going to move through the first 3 rapidly and focus on the last 3, because those are the ones where our vision of what the future of autonomous vehicles comes to the forefront. So the first thing that we're going to do in our neighborhood is we're going to make sure it's got excellent rapid transit. We're going to work with the TTC to get light rail transit built across the whole eastern waterfront to serve our neighborhood. And we're not doing anything innovative here. The city's already got a great plan for LRT. So all we're going to do is offer $100 million in financing support to help deliver it. If the chief barrier to getting transit built is lack of funding, well, we've got funding. We can help with that. So I personally, as Michael said, my background is in getting public transit built. I'm very excited by this. But it's not all that we're doing. We're going to promote walking and cycling. We're going to make sure that this is a neighborhood where you want to walk and bike around, where that is your first choice for short trips. And we're going to do that by making it so that the wind doesn't blow in a way that it is cold. We're going to make it so that the ground is always heated, so it's always free of ice and snow. And we're going to do that while also keeping to that climate positive vision, which is a very difficult engineering nut to crack. We're going to do all of these things, but again, I'll skate past that. Freight transit. We're going to make sure that there are never freight vehicles idling on our streets or even blocking bike lanes or even taking up general purpose lanes. We're going to establish a central place for all packages to be delivered. They will be offloaded onto robots. The robots will deliver them through underground tunnels directly to people's door. So you'll get your Amazon Prime 24/7 deliveries, but you will never have to put up with multiple trucks on your street blocking traffic, blocking you. All right, now to the meat of it. We are going to get rid of personal auto ownership. I want to be clear about this. I'm not going to, if there's a war in a car, let there be a war in the car. There is no place for private automobiles in the cities of the future. I want to repeat that for emphasis. There is no place for private automobiles in the city of the future. Private automobiles are inefficient and expensive. It is already, we're only pushing on an open door here. Younger people have already made the move, or they're moving away from cars in unprecedented numbers. So we are going to lean into that. If you live or work in our neighborhood, we'll offer you a mobility as a service package, so you will get bike share, scooter share, subsidized ride share, a Metro Pass for the TTC. We will have no long-term parking on our site. There'll be some short-term parking, but long-term parking, you will have to park off-site, and a valet will bring it to you when you need it. And if that's going to take about 20 minutes to get your car, and that is a feature, not a bug. We want people to think about using their own private car, and eventually to say, this is a pain in the neck, I'm going to get rid of it. And when autonomous vehicles come, well, all the better. So, autonomous vehicles. We are going to create streets for people. The question was asked earlier, who owns our roads? It's not a mystery. Just look at how we use space and whose interests we respond to. We respond to the interests of drivers. So who owns the roads? Drivers. What are the streets for? Vehicles. But not in Quayside. In Quayside, our streets are going to be for people. We're going to rebalance the right-of-way to make sure that every mode gets its own fair share. And we're going to use dynamic curbs. And so we are going to have everything will be at grade. Our rights-of-way will be designated by lights and buffers that we can move around. Thus, we can dynamically assign space. Most streets, there's maybe 1 or 2 traffic engineers here, so you will know that most streets are designed for peak period traffic, and those limits are fixed in curbs and in concrete, so they can't be changed, which means much of the time the streets are under capacity. Meanwhile, cyclists and pedestrians have no space to move. That's not going to be the case at Quayside. We will always be able to dynamically assign space to the modes that need it most, with a prejudice against automobiles. Managing streets dynamically. This is the other part of it, is that, as I think we'll be talking about in our discussion, the chief worry, we think autonomous vehicles, first of all, they are going to save us. literally save us, because the problem with cars today is not so much that they belch out greenhouse gases, because we could fix that with electric vehicles. It's not so much that they are caustic and acidic to the virtues that make a city great. They insulate you from the city and from your neighbors, though that's true. No, the worst thing about cars is that they kill people. And if you live in Toronto, you know, over the past summer, you know that not a week went by with at least 2 pedestrians being fatally injured on the streets of Toronto. Cars are 1-ton metal boxes that move at high speeds, and they're driven by people that are inattentive, and they kill people. So autonomous vehicles will save us, because they will always watch for people. More to the point, they'll always move at the appropriate speed. So that's good, but the danger is that people will ride in them alone. They'll want the same bubble of security and autonomy that comes with being in a car. If that happens, if everyone is riding in an autonomous vehicle with 1 or even no passengers in it, because you send it out to pick up your dry cleaning or whatever, well then, our streets are going to be even more gridlocked with vehicles than they are now. So we are going to manage our streets dynamically. We're going to make sure that if you bring an autonomous vehicle into our neighborhood, you have to use a designated pickup and drop-off space, and we will charge you for that privilege. But again, those charges will be dynamic. We can adjust those charges and reduce them for shared trips and raise them for empty trips. And this is something we are seriously considering. I see that I'm out of time, so I will leave it there. I've only been able to scratch the surface of what the future is, but I hope I've left you with the idea that the future that we are building in Toronto is going to be a future that is far more friendly, far more conducive to the virtues of city life than what we have now. And if you've got further questions, I'll be happy to take them later on. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Andrew. That is exciting. Is that exciting? I certainly think so. And for somebody who lives in Toronto, I'm really looking forward to seeing this move forward sooner rather than later. And I'm sure you are too. We're going to dig more deeply into these questions in a few minutes and light the fire. But before we do that, I'm going to introduce Stephanie Simard, who is the Senior Planner of Systems and Policy for the Toronto Transit Commission. Now, the Toronto Transit Commission is an almost 100-year-old agency in the City of Toronto that's responsible for all public transit services, and will, in a couple of years, be celebrating its 100th anniversary in 2021, as I understand. So very interesting to see how an agency that has such a long legacy and such a long heritage is now adjusting to the realities of the uncertain future and the changes in technology that are about to come. Now, Stephanie is responsible for standards and policies around all of TTC's services. She's been with the Commission for the last 4 years and working on things like microtransit, service integration, and automated vehicles. So before she joined TTC, she was a transportation planning consultant, so she has experience on both the private and public sectors. Welcome, Stephanie.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. The City of Toronto has been proactively working on this topic since 2015. The work is being led by Ryan Lanyon in Transportation Services at the City. I've been a part of the working group working closely with the City on this initiative. Ryan was unable to attend and graciously suggested that I could represent the City's AV team, so I'm happy to be here today to do so and provide an overview of the City of Toronto's tactical plan on automated vehicles. So the city has been taking a change leadership approach when it comes to AVs since it started working on this topic in 2015. And the real catalyst was a white paper that the city commissioned called Driving Changes. This was a paper that was the basis for a lot of important discussions at the city regarding mobility, safety, equity in the built environment. And through those discussions, an interdivisional working group on the topic of AVs was established, and an AV work plan was initiated. And I'll spend the next few slides highlighting what the city's tactical plan is all about. So here's a look at who participates on the interdivisional working group. Over 30 divisions participate, and you get a range of perspectives from the city manager's office to police services to public health. A key realization from this working group was that the City of Toronto already has a vision for how it will grow and change. And this is guided by a strategic plan, and it focuses on city building, economic vitality, environmental sustainability, etc. So with this vision already in place, the working group knew that the potential disruption of AVs should really be harnessed to advance this vision and not deter the city. As a result of that, it became apparent that we needed a tactical plan. And so this tactical plan was created to fill a gap between emerging technical understandings of AVs and the City of Toronto's existing long-term vision, the strategies and plans that they had to become a healthy, equitable, livable, and sustainable city. So the plan outlines how the city should prepare for AVs and how it can influence the introduction of the technology in these early stages. The overall goal is really for the city to be proactive, ensuring that Toronto is well placed to both maximize the opportunities and mitigate potential externalities placed on a municipality from the arrival of this technology. And really, the historical case has shown that if a proactive vision for the adoption of the technology is not articulated by the government or the public, one will be advanced in its place. So the plan consists of 7 broad directions, and these directions were derived from interpreting the City of Toronto's strategic vision for the future of the transportation system. Every one of these directions is built on the foundation comprised of other plans or policies that have already been approved by council. And the plan recognizes that automation should be a tool that helps move the city towards a future it has already envisioned, rather than act as a force that pushes Toronto off of its course. And what I'll do is just highlight the last direction and provide a little bit of detail on what the plan consists of, how the city is planning on encouraging and supporting AVs when it comes to transportation system efficiency. So on the right is a table that kind of summarizes the structure of the plan. So there's a vision for transportation system efficiency, and it's a long-term vision. So by 2050, the city will have harnessed the adoption of AVs to increase system capacity and manage system demand. So based on that vision, there were goals developed under there, and then it took it one step further with specific tactics. So one of the goals under here is to manage system demand, and then specific tactic is to manage travel demand. And as part of this tactical plan, they have an AV readiness plan. So they've outlined concrete steps of progress that they want to make over the next 3 years. So an example in this case of progress that the city wants to make by 2022 is to study potential issues associated with zero occupant vehicles, engage with stakeholders and identify potential solutions, and then start to begin generating policy options should zero occupant vehicles become prevalent and it become an issue in the City of Toronto. And each direction in the plan is structured this way. In addition to the directions in the plan, the city has also identified the need to develop transportation innovation zones, whether it's a specific zone that's yet to be determined, but specifically a framework. And so what the city found is that it's increasingly being approached by private sector actors with requests to test new technologies on city infrastructure. And although these requests present unique opportunities for the city, they also provide challenges. The city doesn't have a framework for systematically assessing these proposals or obtaining approvals. And there's no dedicated area to testing, leaving some opportunities unseized. So over the next 3 years, they would like to develop a framework, and that'll set the course for facilitating these private sector-led technology trials. And it'll help ensure that these trials have proper public and stakeholder engagement, and hopefully working with the public and the stakeholders, we'll be able to test and have trials that are supported by the public, and they also support existing city priorities. And this will really be a dedicated place to learn about AVs. Overall, I think the tactical plan looks to strike a balance between providing prescriptive direction while still remaining flexible in an uncertain future. So the document is planned to be reviewed yearly and more formally every 3 years. And this is to adapt the actions to the pace of change and developments in AV technology. So the city will continue to consult with the industry and community stakeholders, ensuring the actions that are identified align with the timeline of the technology. And the interdivisional working group will continue to work together, remain multidisciplinary. I think it's been very key, and it reflects a range of perspectives and considers all angles. And overall, I think the plan has created a framework that makes it possible for the city to achieve its vision no matter which path the technology takes. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Stephanie. It's really great to see that Canada's largest municipality is at the forefront of looking at the potential and also looking at the rapid technological development and the advent of AVs as an opportunity as opposed to a threat. And I think the real challenge facing all of us going forward is kind of to look at Andrew's preferred future as one extreme, because really in terms of the adoption of AVs, we face a continuum from one extreme where everybody will be using a shared vehicle, where there will be no more private car ownership. And when we want to go somewhere, we use our Mass app to summon whatever vehicle we need, and it will be there, and there will be no need, no desire to own a private personal vehicle anymore. The other extreme, of course, is that autonomous or automated vehicles will be so easy to buy, so cheap, 3D printed, that we all want to have 2 or 3 of them in our fleets, and that our roads become congested. And that's sort of the hell versus the heaven scenario, as a lot of us have put it in the past, of our future road use. And the question is, where on that continuum will we end up? At one end or at the other end? Probably not, but somewhere in between. And which way do we gravitate, towards one side or the other? And I think that's really, in many ways, the question that's going to be facing municipalities and other decision makers in the coming years. How do we influence that? And how do we influence that in the messy democratic society in which we live, where we can't just make a decision and make it stick? So I'm going to encourage all of you to think about the questions that are going around in your heads, because we've got a fair bit of time, and we want to respond to your questions. We want to light the fire up here and get the debate going around this incredibly important topic. So in the meantime, I'm going to get things started by asking, in terms of the different interests that are going to be competing for our road space in the future, how can a municipality incentivize going towards, maybe I'll ask you first, Andrew, your ideal of no more cars, no more private automobiles. What are the measures that we have, that municipalities have, to nudge us in that direction, given that we are in a democratic society?
Microphone over there. Thank you, Michael. I would answer, rather than cast that question in the future tense, let's cast it in the present tense. What tools do cities have now, could they be using today, to help fix the problems that I was alluding to in my remarks? The obvious answer, it's obvious in a Toronto context, I hope it's obvious in other cities across Canada too, is the famous law of induced demand. You'll all be familiar with it as transit people, that you can't, if you build more lanes, you don't actually ease gridlock, you just cause gridlock to continue. I think that's widely appreciated, that's seeped out into the public consciousness. What's less well appreciated is the reverse of that, is that if you provide bike lanes, people will bike. If you keep them clear of snow and ice during the winters, people will use them during the winters. If you provide sidewalks that are wide and are pleasant and people want to use, they will use them. The problem in our cities right now is that we do not do this. We don't provide, the bulk of infrastructure is provided for cars, and that's just the cost of doing business, whereas providing it for bike lanes, oh, that's a sop to special interests, and we can't have that. Transit, you'll all be familiar with this, transit often also gets caught in that particular cleft stick. So cities could now use the funding and ability to control the right-of-way that they have to rebalance the provision of space in our rights-of-way for other modes. One of those things I always say, and I think I've said it, I'm going to bore people because they've heard me say it during the breakouts a few times, is it's usually not the case that we don't know what to do. It's that we do know what to do, but it's expensive, so we'd prefer not to. I think that is what is the case right now with transportation infrastructure in our cities. If there's one change I could make right now, that would be it.
So there are two things here. So there are two things here. One is cost, the other is the politics. And
It was ever thus.
I would venture to suggest that the politics are more of a barrier than the cost. Andrew Miller for mayor. Stephanie, do you have thoughts around this question? And are these the sorts of things that are keeping people at the TTC in the City of Toronto awake at night?
Yeah, so I agree with most of what Andrew has said. I think it's, important. So the city has done a great job. Like, we have a vision, we have these goals, and they're all centered around transit and active modes, and we need to start emphasizing that. And I think one of the key things we can do more of is learning by doing. We need to start doing these small pilots or different trials, and that helps the public see what's possible, and communicating that in a transparent way and sticking to why it's more efficient. I think all of those will help with the messaging and the education, and that will allow us to get these changes occurring, and good things will happen.
And you've got one coming up. I hear the mayor just announced a trial. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
I can, but maybe we'll wait till the panel that I'm on at 11, where I'll give another presentation. But yes, we are trialing an automated vehicle in the City of Toronto, and I think it'll be a great learning opportunity.
It's okay, we won't steal your thunder now. Great, we have a question from the audience. Go ahead, please.
Do you have plans to integrate your neighborhood with the rest of the town and beyond?
So the question was, does Sidewalk Labs have plans to integrate our Quayside neighborhood with the rest of Toronto? And the answer is certainly yes. I mean, a mobility network, but it's right there in the word, network. A mobility network only succeeds to the extent that it is part of a larger system. So in terms of transit, we're not proposing a special Hive-Dov line. It's going to be an LRT line that is integrated and interlines with the existing LRT system. Our bike lanes are going to connect right into the bike lanes that are in the north and to the west of our neighborhood. And our roads, well, obviously the streets will also connect. The experience of being mobile in our neighborhood is going to be different. It's going to be better. It's going to feel different, feel more pleasant, no matter what mode that you are using. But absolutely, it'll be integrated. We're not building a little island for tech bros that's off the coast or anything like that.
Brett?
I'm Bjorn Radstrom from Winnipeg Transit. I've got a question for Andrew about privacy. When somebody's using a regular public transit system, or if it's an autonomous vehicle that's run by a city, my personal data about my travel is protected by some pretty stringent privacy laws. But as a private company, if I'm living in the Sidewalk Labs neighborhood, suddenly you're a private company that knows everything about me. You know which packages I order, when they come, when I come and go from my house, what my travel patterns are. And it's in the hands, like I said, of a private company. And Alphabet and Google are a company that monetizes that information. So personally, I find that a little bit disturbing that a private company suddenly knows that much about me just because of the virtue of where I live. What sort of privacy protections will be in place for people who live in neighborhoods like that?
I'm eager to set your mind at ease. But before I do that, let me just say that you've sort of framed this question as we have a choice between a world where our data is collected by private interests and a world where it is not. I'm sorry to say that is not the choice that is before us. Let's take an example which, again, many of you will be familiar with. The former King Street pilot that the TTC launched in the city of Toronto to make it, give a certain amount of protection to streetcars along King Street. The way that they did that was they put up pylons at every intersection, and they monitored everyone that was passing through that intersection, and they had captured through your cell phone your IP address as you went through that intersection. So you were being monitored and your data was being captured, and there was no sign saying that this was being done. Permission was never asked. The data has been collected. We don't know by whom. We don't know to whom it has been given. You can't get it if you ask for it, not that I know of. So that's the city of Toronto. That's not even a private corporation. So we live in a world where data is already being collected on all of us all the time. Like it or lump it, that's the world that we are in. So how do we proceed? Well, at Sidewalk Labs, the way that we proceed is, well, first of all, Amazon already knows everything that you buy from them by virtue of you ordering it from Amazon. And that's a sacrifice that people make in return for convenience. So, and people don't seem to worry about that so much, which always puzzles me. We worry about it because you are anxious about private people using your data against you as a weapon. We don't want people to be anxious about that in our neighborhood. So consequently, our position is data of this sort is so important, it should not be in the hands of a private company. So we heard yesterday from Yoseba about how there's going to be an urban data trust for all the data having to do with electric vehicle charging. We propose something very similar. Any data collected through sensors in our neighborhood, first of all, there will be a sign at every sensor alerting you that data is being collected, telling you for what and where you can go for more information. But also, all data collected by those sensors will not come to Sidewalk Labs. It will go to the public Urban Data Trust. And the Urban Data Trust will only give it to us if we ask for it and can show a good reason, a non-exploitative reason, to hand it over. And that'll also go, if the government of Canada wants to know this data, they will have to ask the Data Trust. And if the Data Trust says we don't think that this is a good enough reason, then the government of Canada won't get it. That's the future that we propose. Data is so important, it is so valuable, it should not be the commodity of any private firm, including us. And so in this way, we hope to make soothe people's anxieties that this is some sort of data commodification play. It really, really isn't. It's about building a better city. That's what we're all about, and that's what we're trying to do.
I think you make a good point, Andrew, especially in terms of the amount of data that we voluntarily give away to private companies every time we use our smartphone. Anybody who has an Android phone is basically clicking yes, I accept every time they download an app and not knowing what that means. Most of us click that box with not the slightest bit of knowledge of what data we're giving, who it's going to, what it's being used for, but we've given that permission. And to me, this seems like a bit more upfront in a way. Next question.
Yeah, I was just curious if you looked at any other ideas that maybe increase the fun factor in a city of the future, personal jetpacks, or maybe setting up like a zip line network in downtown to move people around.
Not so much, in terms of, we did look at, gondolas, and yeah, not so much jetpacks as Larry Page, our founder, owns not one, not two, but 3 different drone companies, giant drone to carry people. So these are things but that is far enough away. We didn't look at that, but that is out there. That is coming. So giant drones, your grandkids will be flying around in them, perhaps. But we very much for the mobility system, what we want to emphasize is that getting around it can be fun, it should be enjoyable, but it is, it's a deadly serious for most people. This is how they get to their jobs. This is how they get back to their homes. This is how they visit their friends and family. What we wanted was a system where what people wanted to do, what was cheap and convenient and enjoyable and fun to do, was the most sustainable thing to do. That's why we emphasize transit so much. That's why we built bike lanes, and we work so hard on making the public realm pleasant and large and enjoyable, so that when people are trying to move around, they say, it doesn't feel like eating your vegetables to want to take the LRT or to walk or take a bike share. It's like, great, I get to take a bike share, or I get to take the streetcar. That's what we're aiming for.
Doug?
Hi, Doug Parker, IBI Group. So if the future we're looking for is a future without single occupancy vehicles, if transit is used for the longer trips, it seems that most trips should be shorter trips. And it seems like maybe cars are still often going to be a little bit of a large thing for a lot of these short trips if there's only an individual person making the trip. So what kind of plans can we make in terms of how we structure the environment so that people are encouraged to share rides when they're ride hailing or using an automated vehicle, and or using other types of smaller vehicles?
So if I understand your question, I think what the question, yeah, how is it that you structure the environment so as to make sure that people are incentivized away from private cars, especially single occupancy or zero occupancy private cars, in favor of other modes? And my answer to that would be, first of all, just make sure that there is ample provision of space for those other modes, and you'll discover just how much latent demand there is for cycling and transit. If Toronto turned one of every general purpose lane into an only bus lane, and then TTC bought enough buses to run along those lanes, I think we'd see today with the existing technology just how much demand there is for transit as opposed to private cars. Ditto with bike lanes. But as for shared vehicles, the problem, we're trying to kill two birds with one stone. Your Ubers and your Lyfts today pick up and drop off in general purpose lanes. They just stop, pick you up, block all traffic. So the way that we handle that is if you ride to or from in a shared vehicle to our neighborhood, or in the future an autonomous taxi bot, you must use one of the pick up and drop off spaces, which we can dynamically assign, and we will charge for their use. And so by charging is the price signal is a powerful thing. By adjusting that charge, we can encourage the sorts of behaviors we want to see, namely more shared rides. And if you really want to ride around like a king in your Uber all by yourself, you can do that. You will just have to pay for that privilege. Because sometimes that's appropriate. Like you have to take an important phone call with your daughter or your boss, and you need privacy. We're not going to say that's not allowed, but that is a privilege, and it should be paid for. In this way, I think there are the tools that we can use to make sure that people use the streets in the most responsible and equitable fashion.
Stephanie, do you have a perspective on this?
I would like to add to that. Thank you. I think that if you want people to change their behavior, then you have to invest in the other services, and you have to make it faster, cheaper, and more reliable to take transit or to bike or to walk, and that's how people will change their behavior. In Toronto, it's still pretty easy to drive around these days, and it's pretty affordable to pay for parking. It's not that inconvenient. So for us at the TTC, we'd love to see our services prioritized. Let's get people on transit, making faster trips, and they'll choose us. And I think the King Pilot's a great example of that, making it more reliable and seeing that latent demand and the increase in ridership.
You mentioned the King Street pilot. Do you see other similar applications in the city that could help build a stronger role for a faster, more efficient, and more convenient transit?
Other applications? Absolutely, yeah. So at this time, the TTC is completing a 5-year service plan, and one of the key pillars and priorities under that plan is to prioritize transit in the suburban corridors. We have over 10 bus routes that carry 30,000 people a day in these areas, and to us that signifies people want to take our services, they're choosing us, so let's give them priority. And so we're exploring those opportunities as part of that plan to give our buses priority. We have 1.2 million people on our buses every day.
Thank you. Another question.
So you're not manufacturers and you're not an EPC, and I'm trying to understand
what is your business model? Why are you doing this?
Why are we trying to build this?
You're not commoditizing the data. So Google, to me, is a giant search engine, and it's predicated on the use of information and prioritizing the classification. So if you're telling us that you're not commoditizing the data, what is your revenue model?
Two things. Firstly, we are a sibling company of Google, but we are not, in fact, Google. Waymo's business is to make autonomous cars. It's not to find a way to make data that Google can use. Ditto with us. Our job is to make a better city. And that's part of Google's strategy. Google is well aware that it's not likely, but tomorrow everyone in this room could say, hey, I'm going to use Bing for all my searches for the rest of my life. And all of a sudden, Google's revenue draws to nothing. It's very important for Google that they've got other companies that can find other ways to make revenue in the future, and we're one of those ways. So what is our business model at Sidewalk Labs? Firstly, we're going to make, in Toronto, we're going to do some vertical development. We're going to be building Quayside. We hope to also build a new headquarters for Google Canada nearby. And in that way, we will make money in the way that a real estate developer traditionally does, buying land, improving it, and then selling it. Horizontal development. We're planning to spread out our system of a dynamic street throughout the whole neighborhood. We've also got very interesting stuff that we're doing in terms of the waste disposal system of the future, the thermal microgrid of the future, the electrical grid of the future. We're going to be building all of these things and hopefully setting them up throughout the wider neighborhood too, what is called in the trade horizontal development. And in return for this, we would expect to get revenue as well. Thirdly, there are some innovations that we need to roll out that simply don't exist in the market today to achieve our vision. We will develop them, and we will sell them, and we will make money. And in Toronto, when we do all of these things, we will make a profit, not a big one, but some. But mostly what we will do is we will demonstrate that these innovations work and that they are the future. And then we can expect to roll those out to other cities around the world. So we are showing that, A, the future can be built now, and that people will want it. And if we think that if we know how to build a better city and can show that we can do it, money will come. But until then, we've got Google backing us, so we're not in a hurry to make a profit.
We have two people who have just stood up. These are going to be our last questions. We're going to have to wrap it up after that. So the gentleman over here in the green.
Thank you. Steve Scott with BC Hydro. Just a question on utilities. There's an ever-competing space for utilities and infrastructure in the streets and in the sidewalks and what have you. What's the plan for utilities in this neighborhood and in the city going forward? And what is required to support vehicle automation and this smart neighborhood? What extra infrastructure or support are you looking for from the utilities to enable this?
The question of what infrastructure, so the question was, what role is there for utilities in the neighborhood that we are building, and what new infrastructure is going to be required, particularly utility infrastructure, to support some of these things? Given that's a big question, and I don't have so much time, I'm afraid I'm going to gloss over the second and just talk about the first part, is we are building an entirely new electrical microgrid for Quayside, such that we want to make it so that we never have to draw electrons from natural gas burning peaking plants, which is what is the peaking solution that is for the electricity system in Ontario. So that involves an awful lot of solar panels and batteries, but we've got an enthusiastic partner in London Hydro, that's London, Ontario Hydro, which is a very forward-thinking utility. They want to figure out what the utility system of the future is going to look like. We are partnering with them to try and deliver this. And Toronto Hydro, I don't want to slight them, they've also been wonderful partners with us as well. So I'm not going to go into too much of the details, but this is a collaborative effort, our microgrid, between us and various Ontario hydro systems. We think it's going to be a very fruitful partnership that will pave the way for similar results in the future.
One final question.
My question is for Stephanie. Andrew is talking about changing the whole district of Toronto. And you, as a public organization, how do you receive and maybe integrate those very futuristic vision into your plan? And how do you remain independent from like a very powerful company? Because you still have to work for the, public people and not like everyone. So that's my question.
Okay, good question. So I'll just speak from the TTC side. I'm sure the city might have different opinions, but for us, it's positive to see that they have incorporated our already LRT plans and supporting the transit plans that we already have. So for us, that's very positive. And I think at the TTC, we've already been thinking about mobility as a service. And I know the city is thinking about dynamic curbs and all of these things. So for us, it's positive to explore those opportunities and learn from it. So sticking with our TTC plans for that area and the city's plans is positive for us and works with our network, and continuing to consult and collaborate, I think will be good.
Well, I have a long list of other questions, but I'm only going to ask one more, and then we'll have to wrap it up for this fireside chat. And it brings us back to the whole question of the role of the municipality. I mean, we've got this uncertain future, we've got this rapid technological change, we've got this competition for road space, and what's the municipality to do? We've got some, like Toronto, that's advanced in terms of looking at what's going on, what the opportunities are, what the threats are, what the challenges are. We've got others out there who probably haven't got the faintest idea, and we've got visions of different kinds. We appreciate the one you've brought forward, Andrew. I share it. I think it's a very exciting vision. But bringing that about, recognizing that there may be different opinions in the community, what is a municipality to do? Assume for a moment that each of you were the mayor. And in 30 seconds, what would be your number one action to get us moving in that direction?
For me, I think it's developing a whole package, using all the tools in the toolbox, prioritizing transit, and keeping that messaging. I think you have to have a clear vision and stay on message and stay on point and move towards that vision and start to have policies or different tools that move you in that direction. And having clear and transparent and open data to communicate to the people, I think will go a long way with moving in that direction and educating on the benefits.
Terrific.
I can't imagine myself as a mayor, but as a former municipal civil servant, I can imagine myself as a city manager. And my advice to my mayor would be, I want to underscore what Stephanie said earlier, the value of pilots. Not every city has got equal capacity. Some cities have more. Those cities can afford to take risks because they can monitor those risks and manage them better than others can. Those cities should do so. They should take chances and try and bring about the future. Others with less resources, it's perfectly okay for them to watch, see what works, see what doesn't work, and then jump to the things that work on the grounds that this is now risk-free. We know how to do this. Like Douglas Coupland said, the future is here. It's just not evenly distributed. The same can be true for municipal policy. It's all right that not every city is on the same level. Some have to take the lead. Some it's appropriate to follow. There's no shame in either of those roles.
Ladies and gentlemen, I think we've been exceptionally fortunate to have had Andrew Miller and Stephanie Simard with us this morning. Let's give them both a big round of applause.